We're live. Happy Atheist Day, everyone. And with
Yeah,
me is Vince or Vern or
yeah,
whatever you want
it's
to be called.
whichever one's fine. I don't mind either way.
Yeah, so how are you, Vince?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for having me on. Pretty uneventful day. I was supposed to get my PC up and running today, but unfortunately that didn't end up happening. So hopefully on Wednesday I'll have a gaming PC finally for the first time ever.
Oh, that sounds cool. I have a gaming laptop.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I got like a Acer Predator.
Hmm.
And who do we have here in the live chat? We have Matt. Is this an anime crossover?
Anime crossover.
We have Bunny. Two beautiful. Thanks, Bunny.
Oh, thank you, Money. How cute, adorable.
And you're there, Vince. Motalu is there. Motalu literally translates to fat potato in Urdu, Hindi, and Bengali. And Bunny is saying my makeup is cute. Thank you, Bunny. Um, and look, Mustard is here. Hey,
Mustard.
Mustard. So, what's up, everyone? So, again, happy Atheist Day. I think it's not Atheist Day where you are. I
It
mean,
still is for me.
it's still
At 2 hours.
22nd for you. It,
Hmm.
it is 23rd for me over here. I'm
Oh,
speaking from the future.
oh no, you're late.
Yeah, you guys late. You guys be late. Fucking North Americans.
Yeah, well,
Well, so yeah. So what have you been up to lately? Like, I haven't seen you like online. Like, you haven't done any live streams, and you don't do pre-recorded videos. You mostly
mhm.
do live.
Yeah, so I used to do live streams every weekend, but after a while, I just sort of plateaued on those things, and in regards to what I wanted to talk about, and so, and at the same time, also my midterms and finals were starting to come up. The university I go to goes by the quarter system, so midterms and finals are literally like neck and neck to each other. It's not even that you don't have that much time after your midterms to study for your finals. And so I was mostly focused on that. I did a podcast with Lawrence Krauss that went up. That was the last video I uploaded, I believe. I've done two podcasts since that I haven't released yet. One with Colin Moriarty. If you're a video gamer, you might know him. He's pretty popular. He used to work at IGN, and then he worked at Kind of Funny. And then I did a podcast with Kurt Jomangel. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He did a documentary, directed a documentary called Better Left Unsaid. In fact, it was reviewed by Atheist Republic, and I gotta upload that soon. That actually ended up being a debate between me and him. For the most part, we agreed in the political project that he was doing, but we disagreed about epistemology. So he was very, in honor of today, he was very sympathetic towards religion, and he was very sympathetic to the Jordan Petersonian view of truth. And I was debating him about that, and then so that's interesting. We're going to see how that pans out when it's fully uploaded, and he's probably going to come back, and we're going to have a much longer debate about that. But that was fun. Yeah. How about yourself, man?
Well, that sounds good. Like, I just like moved to a new place like a month and a half ago, and so I was like busy with setting up my things and everything. So I couldn't upload any videos on my channel. But now hopefully I will. And I am also doing series. Like, I recently also started like HRT,
Oh,
and so
cool.
yeah, I'm doing a series on my other channel which is about like just my journey. Like, there's like one video up there like I just started, and I think tomorrow or the next day I'll update, and there will be a new video which will be the 1 week update of my HRT. So I'm doing this series, and let's see how it goes. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's about it. Also, first of all, for people who don't know, I don't know who, like in our live chat, who wouldn't know this, but for anyone watching who doesn't know what Atheist Day is about, so basically March 23rd we celebrate Atheist Day. So the idea is that atheists in many parts of the world, mostly Islamic countries are persecuted for just being atheists. Like there are several countries, I forgot the number, which have death penalty for you if you are an atheist. And I think Saudi Arabia just declared atheists to be terrorists, like
Oh,
outright terrorists. That
mhm.
doesn't even make any sense. So what we do is like we draw a green circle for the Atheist Day logo. As you can see, I have on my makeup and also here, and you post it on your social media accounts with the hashtag Atheist Day. So it's just, and you don't even need to be atheist to celebrate the day. Like even if you are a religious person, you can still celebrate it. If you are religious and you believe that atheists should not be persecuted for just being atheist, you are very welcome to celebrate Atheist Day with your fellow atheists. So just go to your neighbors, friends, family members who you know to be atheists and just wish them a happy Atheist Day. So that's what Atheist Day is about. And you can just go on like Twitter or Facebook and type in hashtag Atheist Day. You will see lots of photos, posts, tweets about this day and everything. So that's basically it. Um, how do you feel about this day, Vince?
It, you know, yeah, I mean, I think it's necessary, and I think as I sort of I think mentioned to you before we started the video, where it's very difficult for me to realize just how much more how much more normalization atheism really is required on a global scale, because I live in a pretty liberal city, a pretty liberal area. And so this concern about religiosity doesn't seem to be that big of one if you're not taking into consideration the Trump years. But generally speaking, it's not something that really comes up. It's still overwhelmingly religious, right? The United States is the only first world country that is still, the vast majority of people are religious. But on a microscopic scale, when I'm just walking down the streets of Los Angeles, it's not something that you notice, and it's not something that you expect people to even care about, even those who identify as Christian or any other, or like Catholicism or Islamic or whatever it may be. But when you travel towards the Midwest in the United States, or when you look at the statistics, you mentioned the fact that I think it's 13 Islamic countries that in which there's a death penalty for apostasy. You realize that that's really where the problems arise, and the fact that even not taking into consideration those countries, the social nature behind even identifying as an atheist, especially if you have an incredibly religious family, um, is so tremendously high, and it's very taboo. And I have to continuously remind myself of that fact when I'm walking down the streets of Los Angeles, and I realize that, or I'm under the illusion that it's no longer a big deal. We won the arguments against creationism back in 2010, 2006, whatever it may be. So therefore, it's done. No, I don't think it's done. I think we still need a lot of we still need to fight quite a bit more. We need to vocalize ourselves quite a bit more. We need to engage in argumentation quite a bit more. And like, what do you think of this actually? So, it's very difficult to sort of broach the topic from my perspective. But one of the things that I've noticed is that in the United States, at least, the arguments for God from a creationist viewpoint has kind of died down in the intellectual sphere. Now it's mostly what I've noticed people arguing now is that people are actually arguing about whether or not religion is useful. They're no longer on is it true, now they're on is it useful. Um, and I'm thinking to myself, is this it? Is this like the last argument that we can do? Because the arguments for the existence of God lost. So now is the last tree branch that the religious person is trying to grab onto is that it's useful. I don't know. What do you have you noticed that? What do you think of that?
I mean, so I I'm not in the US. I'm from India, so it's kind of a bit different over here. Um, so in India, when like most people just assume that being atheist is like completely fine, no one has a problem with it. And to be frank, to be honest, for the most part, you can be an atheist without getting like persecuted, actively persecuted, and everything. And there aren't like as much of a discourse on religious topics or any topic for the matter in India like there is in the US and some other developed countries. So the discourse in India is like sad to say it's not on that level. But yeah, I mean I understand like you are still talking about like things like the existence of God and some like stupid miracles that happened when people had no idea how things work, like stuff like that. But in India, it's like a very weird discourse. But anyways, so what I want to talk about is like, since I am from India and I've been an atheist for the longest part of my life. I've been an atheist like ever since I was out of kindergarten,
Oh
and
wow.
it was not for any like intellectual reasons. I mean, kind of was like it didn't make any sense to me because I was like learning stuff. So I was like, okay, so water evaporates, it mixes with dusts and stuff, and it forms clouds and everything. So that was basically my understanding back then. And then in Hinduism, we have this god called Brahma who sits on a lotus which bloomed on top of the clouds. So I was like, how the hell can a flower bloom on clouds? Like so there were some of these things, but the most of it was like I hated like traditions being forced on me. So basically, whenever we crossed a temple, my parents used to force me to join my hands, and basically those things I hated being forced into doing things. So that's the main reason I became an atheist, and there were other reasons, but I have been a vocal atheist. I came out as an atheist when I was in like fifth grade or something. And the only thing I got was like my family was like, yeah, you're still a kid. When you will grow up, you will understand the importance of God and religion and everything. But I am 22 now and I still find it ridiculous. So what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, you are not like actively persecuted as you would be in say Saudi Arabia or maybe Iran. Well, in Iran, I think most of the society is atheist now, but the government persecution, you are not persecuted actively. The most you will get is like people will think you are morally inferior and morally and intellectually inferior. You are just not sophisticated enough to understand the importance of gods and religion and stuff like this. So that's what people think, but they don't actively persecute you. But there is persecution when you speak up against religion. So for all the major three religions, like Hinduism is the majority, like over 70% of Indians are Hindus. But even if you speak against Islam or Christianity, there is some sort of backlash. Like there have been like people threatened, like I think there was someone who was killed for like exposing the Christian miracles in the church. So he was just doing this. That's basically what he used to do here in India. And I think one of his friends was shot dead and he had to flee the country. And for Islam, like it's not to the extent as you can see in Pakistan or Middle Eastern countries, but there are people like I think even like I mean, okay, so the most famous, most recent and popular incident would be the riots in the city called Bangalore. Someone posted like Muhammad was a child rapist or something, which he was. And the Muslims, they went to the police, and the police were like, they were not really doing much because it was a Hindu guy who posted that. And the the Muslims, the offended Muslims, they just started a fucking riot. I think they destroyed cars and everything, and two people were probably killed, something like that. And Hindus like just go to the news, just type in Hindutva, Hinduism, India, and you will see tons of shit like that, like thrashing of Muslims, Dalits, and like the IT cells, the ruling party's IT cells and everything. They have taken control over social media, and blasphemy and decent sedition, these are like the things that like it's really scary if you're like going against Hinduism and the government. Like there have been people accused, charged with blasphemy for just not naming a Hindu, an ancient Hindu king by his full name. So they just shortened the name and they were charged with blasphemy, which is like ridiculous. And stuff like this happens. So yes, there is some kind of persecution. It's most like anti-theist persecution. So if you speak up against them, and if you just say you don't believe it, yeah, they will like look at you weird or something. Some people, but active persecution, yeah, it might happen, it might still happen, like in the Orthodox Muslim families, Christian families, as well as Hindu families, where people might just like isolate you from the families and everything. But in the wider society in general, you are still way safer in India if you just say that, yeah, you don't believe in a god or gods, but when you go and speak up against them, then you are not as safe. So that's the thing in India. I wanted to talk about that because I think many people think like India is very safe for atheists, which is safe for like if you just say you're an atheist, but not an anti-theist.
Hmm.
Um, and I wanted to ask you, like, uh, for people outside the US, we hear shit about the southern states in the US, the Bible Belt,
Hmm.
as most people call it. So, are atheists like actively persecuted there? How, if they are, like, to what extent?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the severity of persecution that, well, the severity of the definition of persecution that you're given. I don't live in the southern states. I've never even visited there, but um, my interest in that comes mainly from reading people like Stephen Prothero, in which he talks about how religion sort of became popular in those southern states and how religion itself became a marketplace, and that's why the United States is so overwhelmingly religious. And you see this religiosity mostly pronounced in those Midwestern states, southern states. And so my assumption would be that to be an atheist there is mostly more of a social taboo than anything else, right? I mean, you could probably find a few instances in which someone wasn't given a job because either vocally online they were an atheist, or mainly because they believed in some social issues that were taboo there as well. I know a few people who live in Texas, for instance, not in Dallas or Austin, but in the much more socially conservative areas of Texas, in which they're ostracized for their identity, for them coming out as an atheist, and their parent, and even political inclinations. It's not even just being an atheist. Is if you're a Democrat or left leaning or liberal or progressive, you're pretty much screwed if you have a staunch right wing family. And so my understanding of it would be that it's more of a social taboo than anything else. Obviously, there's nothing judicial that mainly we need to be hugely concerned about. I think there are some states actually in which there's some old thing that isn't even enforced, in which an atheist can't take an office. Like it's written somewhere, but it's not technically enforced. No one actually cares about it, which is concerning that it's even written there in the first place and that no one's made any strides to actually take it out. But as far as I'm concerned, that seems to be the case, and that's pretty much the extent to which I can speak about it, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay. So what I forgot to mention is Thomas Shady is here in the live chat. Hey,
Hi,
Thomas.
Thomas.
As someone whose career revolves around atheism, I understand the importance of this holiday. When I saw Atheist Day become popular, I yearned to see what I later built to endorse such a needed event. Glad to see you both celebrating Happy Atheist Day. Happy Atheist Day, Thomas.
Mm.
And should we actually invite Thomas live?
Yeah, if you'd like to.
Hey, Thomas, if you're still watching, no pressure, but I am sending you the link to StreamYard to join this on Discord. Hold on, where was Thomas? Let me just send. Where the fuck did Thomas go? Here. So Thomas, if you're still watching, I sent you the link to this stream on Discord, so you can just join it from there. And we have Rohan. Hey Rohan, you woo. And
Ooh.
yeah, so and that's basically like we talk about like atheism, persecution. Maybe like should the live chat be asking questions? Okay. Mustard is saying the functional aspect. What's Mustard? Can you like elaborate? I don't understand. Do you
Oh, it
understand?
was it was in response to when I was saying that the arguments that are usually employed nowadays about religion are more about whether or not it's good for society rather than whether or not it's true. So the functional aspect of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, I get it. I mean, yes, that's kind of the discourse. Like as I said, that's kind of the discourse in the West, and I mean, it is like there are people even here in India who argue like that, but I don't think that's the more popular discourse in India.
Hmm.
Like the arguments that are used in India are like very, very, very stupid to be quite frank. And like I think very recently someone was saying like the BJP, for people who don't know, BJP is like this Hindu nationalist far right party in India. That's also the ruling party in the government, in the central government right now. And one of their leaders, they said that BJP members don't wouldn't get corona because like they're working hard and reciting some Hindu. I don't remember which one they said exactly, but chanting that like mantra and thing that would like prevent you from getting coronavirus. And that's like this is the discourse we're talking about. So
What was the
like
country where if they drink cow pee or something like that, that it would help? I remember something like that. Well, where was that? India?
yeah,
Oh, all
yeah.
right. Yeah, nice.
I mean, I had this like I made this tweet once like from the east side we're getting the cow piss drinkers, and from the west side we're getting the camel piss drinkers. So camel piss basically west of India. So like the uh, so like I have no fucking idea what's their fetish about like drinking pee. Like what? And there were like people like in India who were saying Indian cows, Indian breed of cows have gold in their milk. What? The level of discourse here is really, really bad.
Mhm.
Oh, and Atheist King is mentioning America ruled over India for 200 years. Uttarakhand CM. So Uttarakhand is this state in India. It's like in the northern part, and CM is like chief minister. So the British Empire ruled over India for 190 years. The first 100 years it was under the British East India Company, and the later 90 years it was under the Queen, so Queen Victoria. So the British Empire ruled in reality, while this fucking idiot he was saying like the US has ruled over India for 200 years. So he cannot even differentiate between what's the US and what's the UK. Like that's like we learn that stuff in school when we are in like elementary school, like third or fourth grade, that yeah, the we were ruled by the British. And that's what we learn in school. Like children, like even in kindergarten many children know that the British ruled over us. And this fucking idiot is like insane.
I was reading that. I'm like, oh, is there some part of Indian history that I don't know about that I should be embarrassed that I don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, you can find things like several news articles on this. Like Atheist Republic covers many Indian news articles. Like uh, you would see, there's still human sacrifice going on in India. So
Jesus.
like Atheist Republic has covered this. So there's this tradition of Tantra. So basically, what Tantra is it's kind of like it was like the before Hinduism, like before the Aryans came in the subcontinent and stuff. There were this several native cultures and religions and smaller cults and stuff. So there was this like in the northeastern part, in the northern and like eastern parts, there was this these girls, there were these girls like the goddess cult and several other native cults, and they later mixed in with Hinduism and stuff. And Tantra is basically right now is a tradition under Hinduism as well as Buddhism in some cases, but mainly Hinduism. So it includes like black magic, occult,
Mm.
and stuff like that. So there's this tantric gurus who are like people like very orthodox people, but sometimes even like liberal, like not liberal, like more liberal, comparatively liberal people who are just like in a desperate moment. So you know that feeling like when people get too desperate or something, they like they are not thinking logically enough, they're like very emotional, so they just do illogical things. So there are times when less orthodox people who are not as orthodox as like many others. Like they even go to the tantric gurus because they are so desperate in fixing something. And there are like some rare incidents when these gurus, they just advise that you need to sacrifice a human child or something, which is happening more often in India. I don't Okay, so I don't know if it's happening less or more, because I mean, few years ago, I didn't know about like anything. I didn't keep up with the news and stuff. So, and right now that I keep up with the news, like what's happening all across the country and even around the world, so it could be that I am noticing these cases more, or it could be that these are increasing. I don't know which one it is, but the mere fact that this exists, this happens, that's insane. Like they're advising you need to sacrifice a human child, and these people are going kidnapping children and sacrificing them to please the gods, to get favor from the gods, and that's fucking insane. And this is fucking 2021.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, even if there's one case of that, that's automatically
Yeah,
insane.
I mean, even one case is way too uncomfortable for me. Like, and I think Armin mentions this. Armin Nawabi is the founder of Atheist Republic. For people who don't know, so I think he mentions this. It's because this is happening in India that people are not noticing it enough. For example, just if it happened in Texas, like it's a very religious state,
Hmm.
Texas. So if it happened in Texas, I think the entire world would be like upside down or something. Like they would
Hmm.
be outraged about it. But it's like even if it was one case, and there have been a few cases in the last few months. There have been quite a few cases, and no one knows about it. No one knows
Hmm.
about those, and people still, like, this angers me a lot. People in the West have this romanticized idea of Hinduism, this like something exotic and like yoga and things like that, which I fucking hate. I'm not going to lie. I hate that people think of it as this romanticized idea. They have no idea about what karma is. They're like, oh yeah, if you do good things, you will have good outcome. If you do bad things, you'll have bad outcomes, or someone will do bad things to you, whatever. Like, no, karma is like very, very like stupid, and not just stupid, it's very regressive, and it's so barbaric concept that like it karma, you carry your karma to your next birth. Like when as you're born, so there's the scripture in Hinduism, as you're born in the womb, you face all the traumatic experiences of your past lives, the bad deeds that you have done. And bad deeds are not like what we consider bad deeds according to the Hindu scriptures,
Hmm.
like traditions like from 2000 years ago. So you as a kid, like not even, you were not even born, you are in the womb, and you are facing all this trauma. And that's the reasoning they give, that when they pull you out of the womb, the baby cries because they're facing that, like all of their karma, the bad deeds they have done, they're facing that kind of trauma and shit. Like you are experiencing every shit you have done in your past lives and you regret it. And that's the reason they gave it for. Like imagine saying, oh, this baby is crying because it has regrets for its past life. Like the baby was just born. Like I what the fuck. So
Hmm.
that's karma. You are carrying your karma to your next life. And so you do something like the bad karma accumulates, and several generations after and before you, because they're like in heaven or hell or in their next lives, they're affected by your bad karma. And then also the caste system. So this story in Ramayana, that there was the Shudra. Shudra is the lowest caste in Hinduism. Like they're the slave caste. Most books use the word servant because they don't want to use the word slave. But if you read the scripture, you will know they're the slave caste. So a guy from the slave caste, he was reading the Vedas, which are like the eternal knowledge, according to Hinduism. So he was reading the Vedas, and Ram, this legendary Hindu king, god king, he came and he killed that guy because for reading the Vedas, for being lower caste, because him being a slave caste, his dharma or his religious duty is not to study but to be a slave.
Hmm.
So since he was studying, bad karma was getting accumulated in the kingdom, and some son of a noble person died in the kingdom, and that's why Ram came and killed him. So that's what karma is, and people in the West have this romanticized idea of what karma is, and that's pure BS.
Hmm.
Like Atheist King is saying, Hindu logic is pure BS. Very true. And Queen Fab is here. Hi, hey Fab. So, what do you think about this? I don't know if you have encountered like this Hindu ideologies in the US, but
Yeah,
what do you think of this?
yeah, very seldom. My neighbors are Hindu, but I didn't. I very rarely talk to them. In fact, I can't stand them actually. But but aside from that, yeah, there's this weird tendency that the West has to romanticize the exotic, I guess. They do this with Eastern religions, Western Eastern, sorry, Eastern European religions, as well as Asian religions. And well, as you said, I didn't even know the history behind karma, so that's interesting. You know, I'm someone who likes to pretend that I know a thing or two about religion, and so that gets me off guard. And you know, to your point that you originally said that you know there's this atrocity that's going on in India in which there's a significant amount of people sacrificing real life humans, but no one seems to be paying attention because no one cares. It's almost as if there's this expectation that the only thing that really matters are things that are occurring in first world countries. And that's a huge problem. And I think that problem partly stems from moral relativism, in which people will say, well, that's just their culture, or that's something that they're used to, that they're accustomed to, or best case scenario that you get with these people is that well, it's not up to us to decide what their morals should be. Let them decide it, right? So let them have their own civil wars, their own insurgencies, their own retributions, and it's really nefarious. It could be that. It could also be some level of xenophobia. You know, one of the things that I found interesting is that you know recently with this particular pandemic that I will not say because the YouTube algorithm will completely screw this video over if I say it. Um, you know, a lot of people like to say that it's the UK and it's the United States in which a vaccine really came in and these are the two locations that the vaccines are really coming into fruition. And the one country that a lot of people seem to be missing for some strange reason is China. And I am not a fan of China, Chinese government specifically. I'm not a fan of what's going on with the Uyghur genocides. But it's fascinating to see that China does have well-working vaccines that have an efficacy rate higher than those found in the United States, and yet no one knows, no one cares, no one even bats an eye. Um, Now, I'm very careful to immediately say it's because of xenophobia or it's because of any of these things. I'm very, very careful about this sort of stuff. But it does bring into question, why does no one seem to care? Why are people under the impression that the United States is the breakthrough country in which all of these vaccinations are coming from? And I don't know if it's because of xenophobia. I don't know what the real reason is. Maybe it is because people are really angry with China with their civil rights issues that they're undergoing. Maybe that's the case. But it's this really just American centric view in which the things that are not happening in this country don't matter as much. And I get the argument that the United States is the strongest nation of the world. What happens economically and politically in the United States is going to affect every other country, so we should focus on what's going on here quite a bit. I get that. But at the same time, we cannot turn a blind eye to what's going on in other countries. If what's going on in your country is happening at a significant level, why are we not? Like, how is this not a huge uproar, a huge human rights uproar that's occurring? And you know, so who knows?
Yeah, so about the American centric view, I agree with you. It's very annoying. Like, I think both the left and the right in the US have this American centric perspective. Like, the right, obviously, like nationalistic, patriotic, and everything. So, they have this very nationalist tendencies and they have this American centric views that they need to care about only their country and all the other countries can go to hell or whatever. And even the left with their culture relativism and everything, they're like is insane. I think it needs to stop. And the problem with that is like they're not even being consistent everywhere, I think, or they're not even like using it to the extent they should because yeah, the US, they're like free, the country of the free people and everything, and they it has freedom of speech. The United States freedom of speech is really really good, which most other countries don't have. So the thing is like people in China and India, like two of the largest. United States is third, and it has like what 300 million people, 3 to 400 million people.
350.
The U.S. and the China and India. China has like 1.4 billion people. India has 1.35 billion people. Like these are huge numbers we're talking about. Um, but people in these countries, in these two countries, they're not as free as in the US. Um, the China fucking, what was it, Jack Ma? He just disappeared for like just criticizing the CCP. India, like just go to the news. They're like they literally fortified the national capital. India is turning into a dictatorship, and I think recently, Swedish or Swiss, one of those two, there was some like something that came out, and they said India is no longer a proper democracy; it's more like an electoral autocracy. So people don't understand that just having elections doesn't mean it's a democracy. Like you can have elections and it can still not be a democracy. Like fucking North Korea has elections, which don't mean anything.
Hmm.
Um, but so it's an electoral autocracy, and the thing is like India is becoming more and more of a dictatorship, more of an authoritarian regime, and China is already there. Like India will become like China if nothing's to be done, and people in these countries are not very free. So a lot of people cannot speak up. Some people do. Some people just leave the countries. They go to like Europe, Western Europe, or North America, and then they speak up. Some people do speak up from the countries, from like relatively safer places, safer states where like the Hindu nationalists are not in power. Some people speak up and then they get arrested because there are like several students and activists and Muslims in prisons in India for like just speaking up against the atrocities by the government. But people in the US, they have the free speech. They can speak up. They can not just speak up only about their country. They can speak up about the entire world. So I think if they are humanists, then it is kind of their duty to speak up for these countries as well, given how people from these countries cannot speak up for themselves. Like they'll get arrested, they'll get killed, they'll get fucking raped by the police, stuff like that. So I think people from the US, Western Europe, and other free countries, they have, and if they're humanists, because they could be like fucking assholes or something. But if they're humanists, they have the duty to speak up for this. I mean, they don't need to speak up about every fucking issue, but they certainly need to get out of this American centric perspective. Like, oh, it's all about America. Yeah, I understand. Like, whatever happens in the US, it affects the entire world. Like, the entire world is like, the world on an average is getting kind of Americanized in a way. Influence of Hollywood and stuff. So I mean, Indian youths, a lot of Indian youth are Americanized, and thanks to that, like liberalism is also growing thanks to like those things like Hollywood movies and stuff, and everything's fine. But people also need to speak directly against the regimes, authoritarianism, and regressive cultures in other countries like India and China, for example. And there are several other countries, Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia. People need to speak up against all of these. And if you just say, oh, those are their cultures, that's like bigotry of low expectations, because you think that these people don't have enough, like you don't expect them to be equal to you because they cannot have the same standards as you do in more developed countries. So I think that's also like, even if it's not intentional, it's partly bigotry, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a strange level of sanitization that is being had by many people in the United States, especially professors in the academy, in which they say, oh, I thought this said Tom Nichols for a bit. I was about to say, I love your book, Tom. There's this weird level of sanitization in which there's this large group of people, specifically academics, that view everything in power dynamics. So in a particular situation, who has the most amount of power, who has the least amount of power, who benefits most from a situation occurring, and they view everything through that lens. And because they do so, they're under the impression that a lot of these different countries that seem to have really barbaric practices, whether we're talking about FGM or whether we're talking about this idea that women need a companion to leave the country, they say, well, the only reason why we think those are bad is because we're acting from an American-centric viewpoint, and we are imposing our own moral values on them. And the fact of the matter is that the United States has a higher, the power differential between the United States and a country like Saudi Arabia is so large to the point where you can't even honestly analyze what's going on in Saudi Arabia. And then I have to wonder, well, what about the power differentials that's going on in India in the caste system? If you're analyzing everything with that, why not analyze that with India? Why does the analysis of power differentials end at just let's not care about other countries? Why are we ending there? No, go one step further. Analyze that specifically using your own logic, but they don't do that. Um, and I mean, I've gone down the rabbit hole of what's going on with these people. I read way too many books from, you know, this this power differential sort of postmodern understanding, and it really is dangerous because, like, what I say is that look, the people that are supposed to be against this sort of right wing nationalism that really came into fruition in the United States with the election of Donald Trump in 2016, in Western Europe, the rise of right wing populism, and what's going on in India. Like, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is just how crazy the Hindu nationalists are. And so the people who are supposed to be against this are the champions of liberalism. Generally speaking, that's been the left. And to see that a, a significant, not all of them obviously, and not even most of them, but a significant portion of them are ignoring that because they say, well, we shouldn't criticize them in the first place. It's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be on the front lines of this battle, and they're not, and they're screwing that up. And so it really is a shame. It's like we're really missing the forest for the trees here. Um, and that's not to say that there's not some that they're not correct in saying that Howard plays a huge role. Of course, it plays a huge role, but you need to be careful about how big of a role you think it is and whether or not you need to analyze everything through that lens. I don't think you do, and they miss that point. And so it's a shame. It really is. It really is a dang shame.
Yeah, so this one thing I don't understand is like when they say it's their culture, so let them decide it. So what happens when people from this culture, like people like me, who ask them to speak against it? So are they just ignoring it now? Like we are asking you to speak against it. So what happened now? Like what would they say? Like if I go to them and say, yeah, so you are saying that we have to decide about our culture. Well, I'm deciding. I'm from this culture. I was born and raised in this culture. I lived here for the entirety of my life till now, and I am deciding that you should join me in speaking up against this. So what would they reply?
Most likely, they would reply that one, uh, the culture that we have to accept is the dominant culture. So this raises the problem of the minority within the minority, right? Because they love these minority-based groups in other countries, but they only care if it's they don't care about the minority within the minority. And so then they'll say, like, well, you guys first decide. So if you want to start up an insurgency, or you want to start up a civil war, you want to change the rules of your own country, fantastic, do that. But we can't interfere with any of that because this is a problem that your country has. And you asking us to help you guys out, you're basically asking us to impose our own power on you. We cannot impose anything. We have to be like Switzerland and be neutral and just look at what's going on there. And then once you guys decide, then we'll do something. But not until that's done.
That's that's like so stupid. So what the hell would they say about Nazi Germany?
That's an interesting question. And they would probably say that Nazi Germany was a byproduct of, it was a right wing nationalist party. And so they'll say, well, we have to deal with right wing nationalism. It's a Western creation. So it depends on who you're talking to. Some distinguish between Western countries and non-Western countries, and others will just say strictly United States, strictly United Kingdom, strictly Canada. So it depends on who you're talking to. But my assumption would be that, generally speaking, they view everything through the lens of Western versus non-Western, because the Western countries are the imperialists, they're the colonialists, and so it's an us issue that we have to deal with, especially if we're talking about the white race.
And this is so fucking stupid because the Hindu nationalists in India, like they are influenced from Hinduism. Hinduism supports Aryan supremacy in the older scriptures. in the oldest of scriptures, Hinduism does support Aryan supremacy, but these groups, they were largely inspired by Hitler and Mein Kampf.
Hmm.
And the RSS, it was this organization was formed on the same year that Mein Kampf was first published. So,
Yeah, and
and
what I'm saying, by the way, is not this esoteric, oh, it's only a few people that believe this. No, it's like it's pretty popular in American universities. They have entire academic disciplines focused on this thing. It's a pretty popular viewpoint, which is scary. It's
I
scary
mean,
just how
yeah,
popular it is.
I do see these kind of people online. Like I am in several like groups, like LGBTQ groups and several other leftist groups. Being a leftist myself, and I do see these people, and there's also like, to be fair, there's also like people from the West who are opposing those. They're saying that no, we should, because we can, we have a duty to like
Mm,
help people who are in need, help minorities in different countries, and they do call shit out. Like, I mean, from what I have seen, most people just don't know. Like, most people have no fucking idea about the rise of Hindu nationalism in India.
mhm,
They do have idea about China because it's so popular right now. But like even a year or two ago, most people didn't have any idea about China. They were genocide because the CCP, they were like sterilizing people. Even back then, they were building the concentration camps. Even back then, like it has been going on for a while, and most people didn't know it back then, but they just came to know about it like a few months ago. But these people don't know it. But when a lot of these people come to know about these things, they do speak up against it. Like every person I know who has come to know about the Hindu nationalist, not every person, a lot of people I know who have come to know about the rise of Hindu nationalism in India, they have condemned it outright, and they have said that if possible, the US should help and everything. So that's like, there are a lot of people like that, but I've also seen those people who are like, no, it's your deal, you have to do it and everything. And like,
mhm.
that's, and Murtad has a response, or they'll say you are only against your culture because you have been colonized and are using Western standards to judge your culture.
Mm. Yeah, a lot of them said that about the Hong Kong protesters,
I
which
mean,
is beautiful. Yeah, because they were.
so here's the thing. We have been colonized and we are like working on Western standards. So if Western standards right now are so bad, shouldn't these people get out of the standards themselves and embrace better standards which are not Western? So like embrace slavery. Like slavery exists in some cultures even today. Like even in India, there's like a very light version of slavery, like kinda. So yeah, so like if we are against slavery, I'm against slavery. Hinduism endorses slavery, I'm against it. So it's because I'm like influenced by the Western standards. So
Mhm.
I should not be against slavery. Like, because I'm just pointing out slavery because I know they are very sensitive about slavery. And
Yeah.
like Africans, there were like black people selling black slaves to the Americans in Africa. I mean, it doesn't like justify what the American history is like of slavery and everything. It doesn't justify that at all. But there was this culture among black people in Africa who were also like getting the slaves from rival tribes and selling them to white people.
Mhm.
So, would you not criticize the slavery in that culture, or would you like, oh, it's the only slavery that's problematic is when white people enslave people of color, and when people of color enslave people of color, it's not slavery anymore or something?
Mhm. Yeah, this is why I don't like it when a lot of people on the right specifically will say that we're talking about we need to preserve Western values, Western morality. I hate that because it's not Western. It's not what you know what just because they were the first ones to abolish slavery, even if and that's even a tenuous claim. It's not just because they were the first ones to arrive doesn't mean that they created it. it means they discovered it. And that's what I always say. Where I'm not a moral objectivist in the same way someone like Sam Harris is, but I'm a moral realist where I say that we all generally have the same definition of well-being, and from there, from the same definition, we we discover moral values. So the idea that slavery is bad is a moral value that we discover, that we find out. And just because the West was the first to create institutions against slavery, against institutions that they created in the first place, sure, but just because they were the first ones to abolish it, or just because they were the first ones to create a general understanding of human civil rights, doesn't mean we should call it Western values. It's not Western. They're universal human rights. And I think that the faster we realize it, the faster we can really just get out of this weird funk that we're in which we're so reluctant to criticize other countries or criticize other cultures, because it's like you're really unwilling to criticize slavery in another culture just because you're too scared or because you're worried that you're enacting on your own Eurocentric views. Like, no, when we realize that we're not acting on our Western lens, rather we're acting on a universal moral lens, like so many of these issues will be solved. And it's just aggravating, right? It's aggravating because you can't, you can't criticize a country like Saudi Arabia, um, in which there are company laws, because we simply just didn't, we're looking at it through our lens. It's like, well, we'll change your perspective. Don't say I'm looking at this problem through a Western lens. Say I'm looking at this through a universal humanist lens. How about that? It's so much easier, and I promise you're going to be able to actually criticize a lot of these things that are going on in other countries in a much easier way.
Yeah, Matthew was saying like racist people would say Africa started it with. First of all, it doesn't even matter who started it, who ended it. Like we know it's fucking bad, and that's why we should stop it. Like slavery was like fucking common, like everywhere around the world. Like most civilization, I think every civilization had like slaves. Like, it was a common thing, and that's the reason ancient cultures were pretty shit. And we today we know that slavery is bad, and the cultures back then they were shit for endorsing slavery. So it doesn't matter who enslaved whom. The concept of slavery is just bad, and people don't seem to understand it. They fucking don't criticize slavery in different cultures, and there are people who are like, even I have met like it's not at all as popular as in the US, but there are people even in India who are going with this cultural relativism train, and they're like, oh, we should criticize our own culture, our own, like if you identify as ex-Hindu, that's fine, but criticize your own former religion.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go on criticizing Islam. Let ex-Muslims criticize Islam. That's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
so there was this argument that I came across that was like, um, criticizing your leaving your own culture or religion or criticizing it means you recognize the flaws and faults in that culture or religion, um, but taking up someone else's religion without ever experiencing the lifestyle they've had is just wrong. And like to some extent I might understand that, but then again like culture is like divided into two parts. Like there's the part which is just aesthetics, the way you look at it, it looks beautiful to you. And this thing people say like my, like I think you've seen that my culture is not your aesthetic. There's this online thing like if someone, so there's this thing that people say my, like black people and Native Americans, like my culture is not your aesthetic. Like it kind of is, it is even your aesthetic, because when you say that my culture is beautiful, even you are thinking of your culture as an aesthetic. And there's this other part of the culture which is like the morality, the moral values of that culture, which are mostly shit. If there is an ancient culture, most of the culture's moral values are complete garbage. But the aesthetics, like I don't understand, like the goal is for cultures, different ethnicities, different races, for them to not matter at all. Like that's the goal we are going towards. It's not like, oh, if you're brown or if you're black, no, you get to do this because we need more representation. It's like you don't even look at the skin color. You're like, oh, great, you want to do it, you can do it, great. You're hired or something like that. So it shouldn't even matter. That's the goal. And if you're like keeping this separate, like cultures and everything, no, you cannot do anything with their culture. That's cultural appropriation or something like that. I think that's kind of delaying the process of achieve. I mean, I am confident that maybe not in the near future, but in future, somewhere, sometime in the future, we will achieve that goal when it won't matter at all. But if you are still like on this cultural appropriation, this is cultural appropriation, that's cultural appropriation, you cannot criticize their culture and everything like this, then it's delaying that goal. Like, it will come, but we are delaying it if we keep on that train of cultural appropriation and shit. So just let cultures make sense. Just people do what they like and criticize whatever you find bad. It doesn't matter if it's your culture or if it's someone else's culture. Just criticize it from a universal perspective. And then there's this thing like oppressors cannot criticize the culture of the oppressed, like, because it's not because like we want to separate it. They say is that, oh, we just don't want the oppressors to criticize the oppressed because they have already oppressed it, and then there will be this right-wing assholes who are like, they will just take advantage of it. And there's this I mean, basically, I think like slippery slope. So if everyone starts criticizing it, the right wing, the conservatives, they'll take advantage of that and everything. I'm like, we just need to like keep them at bay, like the ex-Muslims are doing. They are like keeping, most of the ex-Muslims are keeping like the Hindu nationalists, the far right Christians, the far right, the Western far right. They are not letting them join the Islam, the criticism of Islam movement, the ex-Muslim movement, and everything. So I really hate this kind of cultural relativism and accusations of cultural appropriation. Like, there are certain cases which I would say is bad. For example, you are just like just wearing like something of a different culture in order to mock it. Like, hey,
Mm.
look at this. I look like a joker or a clown or something. Yeah, that's bad. So I understand those kind of arguments, but there's like, oh yeah, that white guy was like wearing a kimono. That's cultural appropriation. I don't understand that kind of shit.
Yeah, what matters a lot is intent. If you're wearing a religious garb or a cultural garb from another culture, and you're doing it to make fun of the way that they look, probably in bad taste, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it just because you like the way it looks, which by definition means you like a product of another culture, that should be fine. I remember this girl got humiliated by some guy who got over 170,000 likes on this guy's tweet because she wore a prom dress that was Chinese in aesthetic, and he said my culture is not your prom dress or something like that, and 170,000 likes this tweet got. That's insane. That this girl who really enjoys the aesthetic of another culture. And by definition, that means that she is celebrating that culture when she puts on that dress, or at the very least, she is celebrating an aspect of that culture. That's a bad thing? How is that a bad thing? It's this narrative in which, to me, I always say, like, the one thing we need to do with the human race is we need to unify ourselves. We need to realize that we are all the same race. We need to all love each other as the same race. And we need to recognize that we're in this together. We're in this, existential crisis that we have to deal with of living with each other, of dealing with things like climate change, like the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We're in this together. And by continuously dividing us, whether that means saying you cannot celebrate any aspect of my culture because it's not yours, because you just so happen to be born in a different place. You're not a part of it. Doesn't matter if you like it. You were born somewhere else. So you have to only do the things that you were born with. You're dividing us unnecessarily for something as silly as wearing um, a prom dress that originates from a different culture. I think it's silly. Like, we can't keep going on like this.
Yeah, I agree. And Martha Ard has a point, like calling them Western discredits it as some sort of flavored thing as opposed to it being genuine progress. Well, I have actually used the term Western values for a long time because not because they're like Western values because the West created them or something. It's just because the West is where those values have developed. It's like nothing to do. It's just happen chance that the Western people developed those values before the rest of the world. But those values have existed like in several parts of the world. Like atheism was a thing in ancient India. Um, then there are several other things like homosexuality was not condemned by religion in Japan for a long time until the Meiji Restoration, where uh, the Japanese, the West during that time was like extremely homophobic, and Japan wanted to be more like the West. So that's the thing. Like West had a bad influence on like Japan. So that's how they like uh, homosexuality became a taboo in Japan. That's how it happened, and before that, it was fine. But now that we know these values work, just because the countries in the West were the first ones to adopt these values and use them in a good way, doesn't mean the rest of the world doesn't get to. Like the rest of the world should follow just because like that's also kind of a very bigoted thing. Like just like do you think that just because you developed this and used it correctly, you were the first ones to do it correctly, that you are the ones who get to own it, and that people in the rest of the world don't deserve those things? Like I think no, they need to catch up to the West, and if possible they could be like there could be some country like which looks really regressive today, but in future that could just shoot past the Western countries um, in the aspect of like development and moral standards and everything. And so would that be like they might just get some like discover some new values which we don't know today? And so does that mean that only that country deserves that value? Like so let's say in a hypothetical future the Eastern world just shoots past the West, they discover several new values which were like very moral. Like the West seems like barbaric compared to them. Like just speaking about a hypothetical situation, does that mean that the West should never adopt those values? Does that mean that the West stays with the values they have today? So that's not a progressive mentality. That's a conservative mentality.
Yeah, isn't that weird? It goes back to the horseshoe theory. You go so far left that you
Yeah,
become almost
that's
infinite.
conservative. You are trying to conserve this. You are not trying to progress. So I don't understand, for the love of the Satan, for the love of the devil, like why the hell are progressives acting like conservatives?
Hmm.
So as you said, it's the horseshoe theory.
Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, time and time again, it proves to be true. Um, and it's really, really scary stuff when you have the far left and the far right seemingly wanting. Have you seen that really funny video that was like uh the racist and the woke person, like the two best friends video where they both say the same things but they get to the different conclusions, where the woke person and
Oh,
the
wait,
and the
I have actually.
yeah.
I think Rivka sent it.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny video. Yeah, where they
Yeah,
both
I was like,
simultaneously.
yeah. When I watched that video, I was like, this leftist guy isn't that anti-Semitic? And
Oh,
Susanna
oh
was
yeah.
like, oh, the all left is
Oh yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
anti-Semitic. So I was
Mhm.
like, whoa. So what's the difference? Like you were just like you were acting basically the same. You're just like the right is basically, oh, they should stay. I'm not racist. I'm just saying they should just stay among themselves and we should stay among ourselves. Like that we should be separate. And the far left is like, oh no, they have their own culture. They need to belong there, and we have our own culture. We cannot influence each other. Like because basically you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's scary stuff.
Uh, Bish is saying what makes cultural appropriation is eraser, which a lot of people forget. Example, what the Nazis did to the swastika. Yeah, swastika is dharmic symbol, not just a Hindu symbol. It's also present in Buddhism, Sikhism. and stuff. So yeah, that's the symbol. It's technically, I think, if I'm not wrong, it was an Aryan symbol, like the nomadic tribes. So technically, they weren't like the Nazis weren't like completely misusing it. They were just because they wanted to give this idea of Aryan supremacy, they had to use an Aryan symbol, and swastika is an Aryan symbol originally. So they kind of used that correctly, I guess. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Maybe it's the native Indian symbol, and the Aryans later appropriated it. But I think it's an Aryan symbol. And what's this? Otherwise, all cultures are guilty of cultural appropriation. Although I feel like they're the kind of mindset that would make that argument. I mean, yes, I agree with Bish. Like there are other cultures which, for example, Islam, they they appropriated the Kaaba. The Kaaba was originally a polytheistic monument. There were idols inside the Kaaba which Muhammad allegedly broke. And even if Muhammad didn't exist, I think it's likely that it was still like a polytheistic a place, and someone did break those idols. And if not Islam, Hinduism, for example, when the Aryans came, they developed Hinduism in the northwestern part of the subcontinent. That's in mostly in Pakistan now, Pakistan and the state of Punjab in India. And there were several native tribes in India which had their own tribal cultures, and Hinduism appropriated the gods and goddesses and made them into their own gods. So originally the Hinduism didn't have as many gods as it has today. Like there were like a handful of gods, like the Greek and the Norse pantheons. But now they have like millions of gods because they appropriated different other cultures. And several other religions, Christianity did that in Africa. Like in Africa and Latin America, like they still celebrate, like even in Latin America, like there are people who still like worship the old cultures. Like they still live in the old cultures and worship the old gods probably, but they have a huge Catholic influence that it's almost like it's a very, like you can say it's very Catholic. In Africa, there are like African tribes who are like who say they're Christians, but what they do is very pagan. Like that's Catholicism as well. Catholicism is very pagan. Like the idea of Christmas, the origin of Christmas, it's pagan. So there have been like several other cultures who have appropriated other cultures, and those cultures in turn have appropriated cultures before them. That's is It has always been a competition in history of appropriating. So why not blame these other cultures for appropriating even before? Like yes, there was like okay, so maybe they blame Christianity and the Western things. Okay, maybe they appropriated cultures, but that's in the more recent times. There were cultures which have appropriated the cultures before them, before like the concept was West was ever a thing. So why not criticize those cultures as well, because one of those cultures started the action of appropriation. So
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of this. What reminds me is what Noam Chomsky said. Believe it or not, as far left as Noam Chomsky is, he was one of the original arguers against moral relativism. He even debated Michel Foucault, and one of the things that he brought up was that there seems to, this idea that there's no such thing as true morality, that moral values are relative towards their culture. And he says, so okay, so there's no such thing as an objective moral truth. The only objective moral truth is that there are no objective moral truths, and so that's the only one that we should all follow, which transcends all cultures. It's very much like the same people who say that people cannot reason, we cannot reason, reason doesn't exist. Well, by definition, you're using reason to come to the conclusion that reason does not exist, and so it's a self-defeating argument. And yeah, and I think Noam Chomsky is actually one of the great people against postmodernism. So even people who it just goes to show you this isn't something that is exclusive to people who are centrists or right center arguing against this sort of stuff. If Noam Chomsky is saying like you are too far left for me, then you really need to reevaluate just how far left you really want to be. If Noam Chomsky is arguing against you.
yeah, I understand. I mean, it's also like I just noticed that we started with like Atheist Day, then we went on to Hinduism,
Mhm.
and right now we are like discussing the left in the West and cultural
Mhm.
appropriation issue. Like,
Yeah. I think at the beginning, the way I was thinking, like the way we could tie this all back to atheism is that this is almost like the foundation for atheism, I think, in my opinion, is a correct epistemology. So when I first started realizing that I was an atheist, I realized, well, the main focus that I want to aim my eyesight on is how do I know what is true? How do I know what is false? What do I know? What role does inductive knowledge play? And I think that once you come to this conclusion, um, you inevitably hit atheism. And if you have this correct epistemology, I think you also inevitably hit these, at the risk of sounding like I have an inflated opinion of myself, you inevitably also reach the conclusions that we're reaching. Um, and so I think it really is just a matter of having a good epistemology, uh, recognizing how you know what is true and what is not true. So if you're an atheist, by virtue of using moral arguments or by virtue of using or power dynamic arguments, oh, Christianity is nothing more than this imperialistic ideology that was used to that was used to oppress people. Yeah, sure, technically that's pretty accurate, but that has nothing to do with Christianity being true or wrong. Like Christianity can still be true, and that can also still be true. But once you have a correct epistemology and you realize, oh well, it's not true for these philosophical reasons and all these other reasons, um, then the expectation would be that the rest follows. But you're right, we did go off on quite a tangent because we started talking about India and all the atrocities of what's going on in there, and how people in the United States just kind of ignore that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Um, Matthew was saying even voodoo in Africa is the same way we even have the Western versions of Santria, which is just American voodoo. I think America just like has this several concepts. Like I've seen like many Americans and Canadians say like they're basically atheists. Like they have experienced Christianity, they found a shit, and they are like these people are reluctant to even condone Islam because I think they have somewhat of an idea of how bad Islam is. So I think these people are like they hate the Abrahamic religions, but they love these Eastern religions, thinking of them as exotic and stuff. So even though they are technically atheists, they don't really believe in gods and stuff. They're like, oh no, I am a Buddhist, I'm a Zen Buddhist, or I'm a Hindu or something like that, which I really don't like. And Murtad is saying, yeah, it was the epistemology that led me into atheism, or rather actually applying the same epistemology I use elsewhere in religion and not giving it special exception. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you become an atheist when you grow up, I think that's more like the case for me. I was like, I became an atheist when I was in like kindergarten, so I really
Yeah,
didn't.
you got me beat for like 13 years. That's impressive.
Yeah, I'm kindergarten, so I was like 5 or 6 or something.
Hmm.
I just left kindergarten, so I just hated like what we had to do. So we have this like in India we have this Saraswati Puja. Saraswati is basically the goddess of learning. So basically on this day, students like this is basically the festival for students. Like students have to pray and shit for their exam studies and everything. So the goddess can bless their books and bless their capability to learn and study and everything. And I had to sit in a fucking overcrowded room with smoke all around me because they're like burning stuff and there's like smoke all over. And hated that.
Hmm.
And then there's also like you have to take bath with some like stuff on your body and like this is gross. And I hated that kind of stuff. And I was like, fuck this shit. This cannot be true. In what kind of world does the what are this going to even do to me? And then I basically what I did was so as so okay, so what helped me, like there are two things that helped me. Ever since I was kid, like even before like kindergarten, like I was a skeptic. Like I didn't, just because someone said it to me, I didn't believe it. I was like, why does this happen? So I used to question things even before then. And then there was, of course, the influence of Scooby Doo, which is something I still give credit to
No.
for turning me into atheist, because I don't remember a time when I believed in ghosts and monsters. So like the bad kind of stuff. I there was a time when I believed in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. Not even the Tooth Fairy. Even for the Tooth Fairy, I kind of cried. I was like, okay, I see these Hollywood movies, TV shows, and American cartoons where children just keep their teeth under their bed, and the Tooth Fairy comes. And so why the hell are we not taught about it? Do our parents not want us to get free money from some magical fairies? I was like, so one day, so my one of my teeth fell, and I was like, okay, I'll try doing it and see what happens, and nothing happened. So I was like, what, 6 or something. So nothing happened. I was like, okay, this is bullshit. And so the good kind of stuff, I realized that's not true. But for the bad kind of stuff like ghosts and monsters, I realized no, these things, they're just telling me these things to control me. So there was this time of my life when I didn't believe that anyone believes in this stuff. I was like, oh, adults just make this stuff up to control kids. So
Wow.
there was this time when I was like, okay, there's no way. Like they're adults. If I
Hmm.
can figure this out, like this is not true. Like they should be able to figure this out. So I don't think they really believe this. They're just trying to control us with fear. So that's one thing. Like because I know my one of my cousins, he was one of my elder cousins. He used to fear these things. So it was easier to control him in a way, but it was not as easy to control me because I was like, this shit doesn't happen. So I did several trials. Like when I was like leaving for school, there was this picture of Kali in the corridor, and my mother used to ask me to pray to the picture before I leave the house for school. And I was like, even though I did join my hands, I was like, you have seen the picture of Kali, it's like the tongue is out and everything. So I was like mocking Kali like this. So instead of praying, I was just mocking and trying to see if something bad happens to me. And I was like, nothing happens. So this kind of trial and errors, I was like, yeah, this shit isn't real.
Hmm.
So that's how I became an atheist technically, and I came out as an atheist. Like I think it was like a huge house gathering, like family gathering, and they were discussing gods, and I was like, "You guys are fucking stupid."
Oh wow.
So that's basically how I came out. Nothing bad happened. Like they were like, "Oh, you were just a kid. You will understand when you grow up." Like
Mm.
they were literally telling me, "Oh, there have been lots of people like you, and they all believe in God now." So I was like, "Yeah, not
Oh
gonna
wow.
happen."
Yeah. I think for me, I identified as a Catholic till like junior year. But I don't really believe, like, if you put a gun to my head and hooked me up to a lie detector test, um, an incredibly accurate one, I probably would have said, and you asked me, do you believe? And I probably would have said no. If they had, if they were pointing a gun to my head or my family said, I'd probably say no. But my fear of death and my desire to want there to be something more, I would lie to myself and tell myself that I believed. It wasn't until junior year or senior year at high school in which I finally bit the bullet and said, like, yeah, I don't believe in any of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think most people don't become atheists. Like even as an atheist, I did identify as a Hindu because
Mhm.
like I didn't know, like in India, the people just don't know that you can exist outside a religion. So religion is treated like a race in India. So basically, I think you should know if you follow Atheist Republic. So because they cover lots of Indian news, so I think people should know that they're like, if you're born a Muslim, you are a Muslim. So they would even treat ex-Muslims as Muslims because it's, even though they know it's not a race, they still kind of consider it as a race. So you are where you are born. So even if you don't believe in Hinduism, you are still a Hindu because you were born in it. Even if you don't believe in Allah and the Quran, you are still a Muslim because you were born in it. Like there's this guy Javed Akhtar who recently got the Richard Dawkins Award. He's the first Indian to get the Richard Dawkins Award, and there are Hindu nationalists who consider him a Muslim, even though he has never been a Muslim. He's like an atheist.
Mhm.
So he is one of the most popular atheists in India. So That's the thing. Like there's this thing. So I identified. I called myself a Hindu for long before like I actually studied Hinduism. Even there was a time when I was like, yeah, Islam is bad. I don't think Hinduism is that bad because I wasn't seeing like the extreme parts of Hinduism because most of the extreme parts had died back then. Now it's getting revived again these days. But when I was a kid, it almost didn't exist. There were a few cases, but not that I heard about. So
Hmm.
not around me basically. So later when I just grew up and studied Hinduism, I'm like, okay, this is scary. This is this is like really bad. So that's when I was like, okay, no, why do I even call myself a Hindu? And that's when I basically started calling myself an ex-Hindu, and I didn't know any ex-Hindus back then. Like, recently, lately, I've seen there are a few ex-Hindus, like people calling themselves ex-Hindus, which is good. Actually, I think because ex-Muslims, there's been an ex-Muslim movement. I wish there is also an ex-Hindu movement in the near future, if possible. But yeah, that's basically like the concept of a religion. I think we need to introduce that in India, that you can live without a religion, because else people just think, oh, I was born in this community, I need to stay in this community because that's how just people are. That's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Oh, and um, Matthew was saying, I was saying voodoo is like Hinduism in the way they took many of their gods all over Africa and called it voodoo, aka voodoo. I mean, yeah, I mean, most ancient religions and cultures were like that, I guess, before Judaism became a thing. Even I think Judaism was a little bit like that, and then Christianity came in. Bunny is saying, I became an atheist when it was my own will and hard work that got me out of a bad situation with the support of my friends. Well, that's great actually, Bunny. Oh, this one other thing I wanted to mention is that today is Atheist Day. At least here in the East, the West is still in in the past for now. Today is also the death anniversary of a very famous atheist in Indian history. He fought for the Indian independence, and he was hanged along with two other people by the British for basically bombing British outposts in India. So he was an atheist. He has written an essay which is titled "Why I'm an Atheist," uh, and it starts by, I think I love it because it calls Hindus as you Hindus. So basically, that implies that he doesn't identify himself as a Hindu, even though Hindu nationalists today are trying to appropriate him, the appropriation. So they're trying to like say that, oh no, he was a Hindu nationalist and stuff and everything, which he wasn't. So he was an atheist. His name's Bhagat Singh, and his death anniversary. So it's a nice coincidence that Atheist Day falls on the same day as this atheist, which many Indian atheists actually admire, because like being an atheist in colonial India, I would imagine that was not as easy as some people might say.
mm, that's interesting. I've never even heard of this person.
Yeah, I mean, most people, like, for example, the first prime minister of India was an atheist, but people just don't know.
Hmm.
The guy who wrote the Constitution of India, he was an atheist. He was completely an atheist. Like his story is basically, although he called himself a Buddhist, so his story is basically he started hating Hinduism because mostly because of the caste system, and then he tried Islam and Christianity, and then he saw like Christians and Muslims in India also have the caste system. Like they have been so much influenced by Hinduism that they have castes in their own communities, which
Hmm.
is also like he was against the caste system, but he wasn't against the idea of religion, because although he was an atheist, he liked he kind of I think he understood the importance of religion. I mean, he thought that religion is needed, required by common people or something. So what he basically did was he went to Buddhism, because that's also an Indian religion, because Christianity and Islam, they are not Indian, they came from abroad, but Buddhism was an Indian. So what he did was he looked up, he researched Buddhism, and he saw, oh, this is complete horseshit. Buddhism is horseshit. And he was like, okay. So basically, if you imagine like this bottle, so the title here is Buddhism, and the water is actually what Buddhism is, but this is the label, Buddhism. So he
Yeah.
just threw away the water. He threw away everything which makes Buddhism Buddhism, and he got inspired by the French Revolution, which today we call the Enlightenment values. So he incorporated it. So basically, he filled new water in that vessel, which are the French Revolution values, with the French Enlightenment values. He filled this bottle with that, and he still called it Buddhism. That's what his Buddhism is. So he was an atheist, he was a secular humanist, but he called himself a Buddhist because he thought that religion would make easier for people to follow. Like people would just not follow anything. Like what's secular humanism, what's enlightenment values, people didn't know that, and they know what Buddhism is. So I think he just thought that it would make it easier for people to leave Hinduism. So basically his idea was to like destroy Hinduism in a way, so Hinduism just dies out. That was his idea. And that guy, I mean, I admire that guy, even though I don't like his method. Like I don't like that he used Buddhism, because I want all religions to die. That's kind of protecting Buddhism if he
Yeah.
does that. And that's also like so many people have the idea of like, oh, Buddhism's not a religion, it's just like this philosophy or something. Look, that he kind of started that thing. So I don't like that shit, but I admired him as a person, like what he tried to do.
Mhm.
But he wrote the constitution, and most people, I think more people in the world should actually know about him. Like, so there are some atheists in India which like, yeah, they're not that important to the world, but I think this guy, I think more people around the world should know him, especially since like Hindus, like Indians in general, are just growing in most countries. Like I think I'm pretty sure there's like a huge population of Indians in California. And I think you would know about the Cisco caste discrimination case. Do you know about that?
Not really. No.
So the Cisco, you know Cisco, right? The software company.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an American company. So basically, what happened is this Dalit, I think he was Dalit or Shudra. So basically, this lower caste guy, he got into the IITs. The IITs would be the equivalent of the Ivy League in India.
Hmm.
So the Ivy League in the US would be kind of like the IITs only for technology, like engineering and stuff, institutes. So kind of like the MIT, if you will. So he graduated from IITs and he got a job in Cisco as Cisco, and he was never allowed to like he was never promoted to any positions of a manager because he was from a lower caste in that company, in an American company in California.
Wow.
So so basically, like, Hindus are forming communities in Western countries, and they're still practicing this fucking regressive cultures of traditions of caste system and stuff in pretty liberal countries like the US. It's in California, for fuck's sake.
Hmm.
So since there are more and more influences. Like I'm pretty sure Hindus won't like influence the law in the US, probably, but they're influencing like a lot. Like with the growing population of Indian Americans, I think it's still an American concern, because they're literally becoming American citizens now. So it is kind of the American concern,
Mm.
um, that they and to tackle the caste system. I think that's also a reason to know the guy I told you about, the father of the Indian Constitution. And like basically, I think America also needs to battle this issue within like Indian communities, like the and not just Indian. I think several, like most communities, like most foreign communities, if they just form communities, if they stay within the wider society, then they are usually liberal. But if they form their own communities, then they kind of continue those regressive practices.
Mhm. I gotta use the restroom. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was thinking of ending it anyway. We are like at
Oh,
1 hour 30 minute mark, so it's like we're at the last minute. So I think we should call it a day
okay.
for today. We can do it later again.
Yeah, for sure. This was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, it was fun. And well, is there anything else? Okay, Mustard is saying it's Atheist Day for me now, or has been for 2 hours. Well, happy Atheist Day, Mustard. You will late to the party.
Yeah, look,
Uh,
I still got
it's
30. I still got to wait 30 minutes.
it's 1:23 a.m. for me. Atheist Day should fall on a Sunday, not a Monday. It's a Tuesday.
Mhm.
I mean, it will be a Tuesday if you get
Yeah,
Atheist Day where you are. Um, Sounds like what some liberal Muslims do. And Matt's saying a lot of Hindus here and they don't ever talk to me. What? I mean, Indians
yeah,
generally
just because you're in
like to
stuff
talk
of
to
the
white
world.
people and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, anyways, we are done here. So, thank you guys for being in the live chat. Thank you, Vince, for being here.
Mhm.
It
No,
it
hey,
was
thanks Scott, for
interesting.
having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun, and yeah. So you should start streaming again.
In one of these days.
I would be yeah, I would be in the live chat. But yeah, that's basically it. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you again until next time. So let's end the broadcast here. Bye bye.